It's okay to be unhappy about the prices of the new Nintendo Switch 2 and its games, but economics is more complicated than just Nintendo bad. I get that you would want the things you want to be cheaper so that you can afford them. Okay, me too. I also wish these prices were lower, but the assumptions being made about Nintendo right now, the accusations of greed and whatnot, this is just people being spoiled and entitled. There are many comments online for and against Nintendo on these prices. The supportive commenters cite inflation, saying these games actually don't cost more than games from 8 years ago if you do the inflation math. Commenters against say nothing, really. They appeal to feels and the cost of living, which I'll get to in a moment. Here's a short list of Switch 2 complaints from people online since the reveal. But before I go through them, let me say this. There has been a large contingent of the video game media and audience that have hated Nintendo ever since they censored one of the worst video games ever made, Mortal Kombat. They made the developer change the blood into sweat, for example. I'm sure they removed some of the fatalities as well. This is what started Nintendo's reputation of being for children, which is a bad thing somehow. Nintendo has said that as a first-party developer, they will never make M-rated games, which is their prerogative. But M-rated games have appeared on their consoles since. You'd think people would have gotten over it by now. There's always something to nitpick with Nintendo, whether it be cartridges instead of CDs, or tiny DVDs instead of full-size DVDs, or funny-shaped controllers, or controllers missing a button, or just motion control in general. It's funny, the 64 used cartridges instead of CDs because of piracy, I guess, but if you've ever played Mortal Kombat with Shang Tsung on PS1, you'll understand why cartridges were the better choice. These consoles were underpowered. The Switch was so underpowered, people wanted a Switch Pro, which was a precedent set by Sony with the PS4 Pro. When the Wii U failed, I saw plenty of people online hoping that this meant the end of Nintendo as a console manufacturer. People wanted Nintendo to go the way of Sega and just make games. I saw people making YouTube videos about how the Wii U was a flop, and commenters saying that they want to play Nintendo games, they just don't want to buy Nintendo consoles. They want to play Mario and Zelda on Xbox or PlayStation. Nintendo single-handedly saved the video game industry. There was a crash in the 80s, and the Nintendo Entertainment System brought gaming back from the brink. The reason why controllers now look the way they do is because of Nintendo. Though there may have been some deviations over the years, every modern controller still basically looks like a Super Nintendo controller to some degree. Nintendo innovates, people complain. Then others copy, and everyone loves it. This guy knows what I'm talking about. I'm probably too late, but let me say this before anyone calls me a Nintendo sycophant. These are all the consoles I've owned in my lifetime. As you can see, I skipped the Wii and the Wii U because they just didn't appeal to me. If I were truly a Nintendo simp, wouldn't I have owned all their consoles? Anyway, I think this whole kids games thing is doing more work in people's brains than I realized. PlayStation games and Xbox games are for grown-ups, but Nintendo games are just toys, so they should be cheaper. But if you're making a device that, from everything I've heard, is as powerful as a PS4 Pro, but you're making it with more up-to-date tech, and you're making it portable, that might just have to be an expensive device to cover the cost of manufacturing, no matter what kind of games it runs. Number 1, Nintendo charging for the Welcome Tour. Yeah, this is silly. It's basically just a tech demo. Probably should have been free, but it doesn't cost that much. And if it were packed in, how many of you would have actually played this for any length of time? It's a nothing game. It's barely a game. If you want it, you pay a pittance for it. And if you don't want it, you're not missing anything. Number 2, some game cards won't contain any game data, just a download key for the game. Responding to this one point would double the length of the video. It's a very annoying topic, so I'm just going to skip it. Number 3, A and B, the controllers don't use Hall effect analog sticks. The Switch 2 Joy-Cons lock to the console with magnets. Here's a video showing how magnets can interfere with Hall effect magnetic analog sticks. I'll link that full video in the description. We are now guaranteed to have stick drift again because no Hall effect. I'm not saying we won't, but every gaming YouTuber who's been hands-on with the controllers says the sticks feel great and smooth. It has been 8 years since the original Joy-Cons were released. Maybe Nintendo has come up with their own solution. I'll do these together. The Switch 2 upgrades to Switch 1, blah, blah, blah. You can read it yourself. The upgrade should be free, people say. Just like Sony has free upgrades. Whatever free Sony upgrades this guy's talking about are unknown to me. Maybe he's talking about third-party games, but here's a list of monetized first-party PS5 upgrades that I've never heard anyone complain about having to pay for. From what I understand, the Breath of the Wild upgrade would only be $90 for those people who don't already own the game. If you do own either of the Zelda games, it's $10 for the upgrade. If you have the full top-tier Nintendo Online subscription, the upgrade is free for as long as you maintain that subscription. Other upgrades will cost more because they have DLC as well as those cosmetic upgrades. Some upgrades are free even without Nintendo Online. Games as far back as ARMS are getting free upgrades. Mario Odyssey's getting a free upgrade, which makes me happy because that game's fucking great. Also, Nintendo has 33% off sales on their games all the time. My source, trust me, bro, I can't prove it right now, but I'm sure I've seen Nintendo have 33% off sales on first-party games on their eShop a bunch of times. Then you have game vouchers, £84 for 2 games. I live in England, so everything's pounds. £84, 2 games. When Tears of the Kingdom came out, it was £70. I got it for 42 effectively because I got it with a voucher. Yeah, you got to wait until there's another game you want so you don't waste the other voucher, but with all of this, you can't say that Nintendo never has any deals. Number 7, Nintendo doesn't lower the prices of their games over time. Now, this doesn't really affect me because I tend to be day one with stuff like Mario and Zelda, but I will say I don't like the fact that Nintendo doesn't lower the full price of their games over time, okay? I agree with you, that's not good. But hey, that's what those 33% off sales are for. Just because other companies drop their prices doesn't mean Nintendo has to. They've always done their own thing. And now number 8, are the console and its games overpriced, and is Nintendo greedy? No. You call Nintendo greedy because you assume that they've set these prices way higher than they would need to make a profit. Now, I'm no economist or businessman, and I'm sure I'm going to get many people in my comments pretending to be those things, but every business is in the business of making as much money as they can. As long as those corporations aren't making money in ways that are corrupt, illegal, and unnecessarily harmful, you shouldn't have a problem with that. How much profit is justifiable isn't going to be based on some subjective notion of fairness. Not when we have good old-fashioned supply and demand. The price of any product is going to be set by a number of factors. One of the main factors is the precedent set by prior purchases. I get that if people could get all the things they want for free, they would. But how much money people have shown themselves willing to pay in the past for a thing they can't get through piracy or shoplifting is going to have a huge effect on future prices. On the question of Nintendo's greed, I think we need to look at 4 things. 1, average wages over the years. Number 2, the cost of living over the years. Number 3, historical console and game prices. And number 4, console and game production costs. And of course, you're going to need to run some of those numbers through an inflation calculator. I tried to do this research as best I could as a non-economist. And what I found is, fuck you, is what I found. It's fucking stupidest argument against Nintendo. How dare Nintendo set their prices so high without accounting for the cost? How do you know they didn't do that? Do the people who work at Nintendo not live in the same world you do? I am not Mitt Romney.
Corporations are people, my friend.
Corporations are not people, but they are made of people, and those people are subject to all the same economic hardships and struggles as everyone else. The cost of living has hit Nintendo employees just like it's hit you and me, and they have set their prices at a level which will allow them to make more games and consoles and eat and pay their rent and whatever other bills they might have. People have become so accustomed to downloading music and movies for free, they no longer know the difference between wants and needs, between discretionary spending and necessary spending. If Nintendo, which is a company that makes products nobody actually needs, raises their prices in a way that matches inflation, can we really be mad at them because we can't afford their products because the price of necessary expenditures has gone up even more than inflation? Nintendo isn't selling an essential service. They're not selling food or clothing, shelter or warmth, healthcare. It's a purely voluntary purchase. You don't need this stuff to live, and it's not Nintendo's job to babysit your bank balance. Before someone accuses me of dodging, I'm going to address the earlier points as best I can. For 1 and 2, I'm not really enough of an economist to really dig into these numbers. All I can do is Google, and I've seen conflicting information. Have average wages gone up in a way that matches inflation? Some say yes, some sources say no. Some say not quite, but it's closer than people think. But the cost of living, that is, house prices, groceries, energy and utility bills, education and childcare, public transport, the cost of these things has gone up far beyond inflation. And this is the real problem. This is the real reason why the price of the Switch 2 feels so high. This is the real reason why consumers have lost purchasing power. Nintendo are not the greedy ones here. The people responsible for the cost of living increase are the ones you should be mad at. It's not Nintendo's fault the cost of living has risen beyond inflation, and it's not Nintendo's responsibility to fix the global economy. For 3 and 4, yes, the Switch 2 console and games are more expensive than the Switch 1, even accounting for inflation. And we can all be upset about that, but it's ridiculous to act like Nintendo is uniquely greedy for this. First, PS5 and Xbox have already set a precedent for higher game prices in recent years. Their games are around $70 now, which is higher than last-gen games. Second, we don't know how much these Nintendo games cost to produce. Just because these games aren't photorealistic doesn't mean these games are inexpensive to make. Third, we didn't know this at the time of the reveal, but there are now credible estimates online that have switched to manufacturing costs at $400. So, according to these real economists, Nintendo actually is selling the console at a loss. And finally, you can't ignore historical console and game prices. If you search online, you can find images from catalogs showing console and game prices from the 80s and 90s. And no, they're not all Canadian. You can also find charts and bar graphs showing game prices from different console eras. Here's an image from IGN showing Nintendo console prices at launch and adjusted for inflation. Seems to me that gaming is mostly cheaper now than it's been historically. Now that we know that these prices are completely fair, what do you want Nintendo to do? Because I can only see two options. Number one, they don't release a console this year. And then you'll moan that they haven't released a console in 10 years and the Switch was underpowered then, it's even more underpowered now. Or two, they release a console less expensive to produce, and then you'll moan about how underpowered it is. What do you want exactly? You want a bespoke price? You want Nintendo to call you up, ask you how much money you make in a year and set a price just for you? You know, this whole thing has reminded me of a video I saw a few months back from a streamer called DefenCe. He was talking about PS5 Pro scalpers. He said that the price set by the scalpers probably should have been the price set by the manufacturer in the first place because there are people willing to pay that higher price. His response to those people who disagreed with him was to call them spoiled and entitled. Now, I disagree with this, as did everyone who popped up on his stream. But it's funny because the arguments he used against people upset with the scalpers are the same arguments that I would use against people upset with the real price of the Switch 2 in games. I mean, there are people selling these things on eBay for $800, $900, and rich and or stupid people will buy them. I don't think it's spoiled to feel entitled to buy a product at the price set by the manufacturer. And if scalpers getting away with me doing that, then fuck scalpers. In fact, he did say this in response to a question about what the word entitled means in this context.
Why does the accusation of entitlement only apply to people who want lower prices but not wealthy customers who can buy up something at any price? Well, because if you can afford something, then most people, at least in a capitalist economy, say that you would be entitled to it. If you can buy something, then you would be able to buy it, right? Isn't that how that works? I mean, you could argue there are some things that you shouldn't be entitled to via like money. So for instance, like let's say that you can afford to go to a certain college. It doesn't necessarily mean you're entitled to a diploma or entitled to a good grade. You have to earn that in other ways. But if we're talking about consumer goods, you are entitled to those by buying them, right?
So there you go. If you have enough money to buy a product at the store price and the purchase of that product won't hurt your ability to pay bills, then yes, you are entitled to buy that product. But here's the problem. You are not entitled to have something just because you want it, which seems to be the problem with these Nintendo haters. Let me say that again. Many of you seem to think that just because you want something means you should have it, and any barrier between you and getting it is some kind of injustice done to you. Nintendo has personally slighted you by setting the price where they did. You feel entitled to buy the console at a lower price. Why? Because reasons. So what do now? You steal. Every time this guy releases a video about Nintendo, the comments are full of people saying, "Oh, these prices are so high, I'm being driven to piracy." Bunch of fucking lies, you were going to do it anyway. Nintendo goes after people hard for facilitating emulation, and people make the game preservation argument to defend this piracy. Or they'll say, "These games are so old, Nintendo doesn't even make any money off of them anymore. Why shouldn't we be allowed to emulate them?" If there is some old-ass game that nobody profits from anymore, and there's no other way than emulation for you to play it, then I don't really give a shit, but don't pretend like you're doing anything noble. And don't pretend that any of what I just said justifies emulating Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, or any other game that's been released in the past 10 to 15 years. These games are still widely available to anyone. If the prices were lower, you'd still do the piracy. Why? Because you motherfuckers just want shit for free. By the way, I also want shit for free. I wish I could have everything I want for nothing, or that I could win the lottery and just be able to buy anything I want. But the difference is, I recognize that this is a pipe dream. The difference between you and me is that I don't think the universe should reorient itself to match my preferences. I understand and accept that there are monetary constraints on me, and I recognize that these monetary constraints are also on the people who work at Nintendo. Your average Nintendo developer is not a millionaire. He's a salaried employee. It's a regular 9 to 5 for these people, and they deserve to be paid for their work. Hey, remember earlier when I brought up historical console and game prices being more expensive? Apparently, I'm not allowed to do that because of a number of arguments made by people online, including the guy in this video. He's not the only one making these arguments, so I will be paraphrasing these people instead of responding to him more directly, except for that one thing. You can make up your own mind if you have one about how charitable I'm being to the guy. Yes, gaming was more expensive in the 90s, but much of that was due to cartridges being so expensive, and game prices dropped or leveled out once CDs came into common usage. This is true, I guess, and probably the reason why Nintendo lost so much third-party support with the 64. But I think we can say that this particular decreased manufacturing cost is offset by increased development costs in general. The teams are larger, the games are bigger, and they take longer to make. Look how many core Mario games there were on each Nintendo console. There's less and less per generation. Yes, gaming is cheaper now than it was in the 90s, but the cost of living has gone up since the 90s. If you're going to make this argument, then I'll just say, hey, I guess these things have canceled each other out, because it was only ever the disposable end of our income that we were using to buy these things in the first place. You now have less disposable income than someone your age in the 90s. Good news. The thing you want but don't need is now cheaper. Also, once again, the cost of living is not Nintendo's fault. Yes, gaming was more expensive in the 90s, but you could play lots of games by renting them. This is also true. I rented from Blockbuster all the time. But once again, not Nintendo's fault. Video rental places don't exist anymore. But here's the problem that I'm having with this part of the video. While talking about renting, he says he had a modded Xbox that could rip games straight to the hard drive. So he could, in effect, buy these games at an extreme discount by renting them and copying them. And he doesn't say this like it's in passing. He says it like it's part of the argument. It's okay that games were more expensive back in the day because A, cartridges were expensive, B, the cost of living was lower, and C, you could just steal them. So it's the piracy argument again. Just because you can get a thing you want for free by stealing it doesn't mean the thing you want should have been less expensive in the first place. At the end of the video, he says, don't let anyone suggest that just because video games are cheaper now compared to 1992, that you have no right to complain. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not here to tell you you can't complain. That's not my goal with this video. I'm also, as I said, not happy about these prices. I'm just saying you're complaining at the wrong people. To bring up the cost of living here against Nintendo, basically what you're saying is this entertainment company should lower the prices of their entertainment products because other people are fucking my wallet. It's ridiculous. Number 9, Nintendo is setting a precedent with these prices. Now everything will go up. There are plenty of things that Nintendo does that I don't like, same as any other company, but I don't feel that they've done anything so egregious that I need to boycott them. You feel you know something about Nintendo's business practices that you don't like? You feel you know something about the behind the scenes at Nintendo since Reggie left and Iwata died? Cool. You go ahead and boycott them if you want to. Do what I've been reading in all these comment sections the past couple of weeks. Vote with your wallet. If pre-orders are any indication, you will be outvoted, the same way I was outvoted on the PS4 Pro. I remember thinking at the time that the PS4 Pro was a bad move. The idea of a mid-generation refresh is bullshit. I don't know how you judge the power of a console generation, but back in the day, we judged power by graphics. Look at Uncharted 3, God of War Ascension, and The Last of Us, and then look at their sequels on the PS4. Dramatic visual improvements, yet internet tech experts complained the PS4 and the Xbone weren't powerful enough. So then we got pro versions of these consoles, which were a complete waste of money. I had a base PS4, I never bought a PS4 Pro, and I never felt as though I was missing anything. And it turns out I wasn't, because all those PS4 Pro upgrades, at least on every PS4 game I played, ran even better on a PS5. So I was rewarded by waiting, and I saved money by doing so. Now we're in the middle of the PS5 generation, and the only thing I've seen here that's impressed me is the Matrix demo. From the PS4 to 5, there has been nowhere near as much of a graphical leap in quality as from the 3 to the 4, and you can fight me on this. I think the reason why I've been so unimpressed is because PS5 shortages had us stuck in this extra long cross-generational period. So it could be that we haven't even gotten to see what the PS5 is really capable of, but hey, it's been 4 years, so now we got a PS5 Pro. Why? Because the PS4 Pro sold well. That is called a precedent. And though I did hear some people complain about the price of the PS5 Pro, nowhere near as many and nowhere near as loud as the people who are currently complaining at Nintendo. Even though the Switch 2 is an actual full generational leap over the Switch 1. Imagine if Nintendo had done what so many online wanted and given us a Switch Pro. Then you'd have even more wasted money to complain about. Nintendo did what console manufacturers should do: make a box, make games for that box for 5 to 10 years, then make a new box. For those of you crying about how Nintendo is setting a precedent with the price of the Switch 2 and games, if you bought a PS4 Pro, a PS5 Pro, or a PlayStation Portal, you need to sit the fuck down and shut up. There's a more than 8-year gap between the release of the Switch 1 and 2, and the 2 is an actual new console. If you bought a PS4 Pro, you helped Sony set a precedent that it's okay for them to sell us half-assed consoles that will be obsolete in half that time. In summary, calm the fuck down. Stop acting like Nintendo's the farmer, bro. These prices are actually fair. If they were 10 or 20% higher, then even I would be somewhat annoyed. But even then, at the end of the day, video games are luxury items. We want them, but we don't need them. I actually wasn't planning on pre-ordering a Switch 2, but I found a 12-month interest-free buy now pay later payment plan. So there are always deals out there for you if you're willing to look. It's time for us, legitimate Nintendo fans, to like, comment, and subscribe and start ignoring the clickbait headlines and sensationalist YouTube titles from people just trying to extract AdSense from Nintendo's current bad PR. The Sony ponies, the Xbots, the PC elitists, they've had their fun. And after you've waited an extra payday or 2 or 3, you can start having fun too, with your very own, shiny, brand new Switch 2.
With your broke ass.